Good to go. John?
Thank you. Okay.
Back from where we left off. So I think basically from this slide, what we need to take into account is the communities that had the increased stakeholder involvement had the highest uptake of participants in the two-day event. So Jericho and Aramac in those age groups had the best per capita attendance. And even though the event was held in Barcaldine, we saw the lowest uptake in the kids. So I think that can be reflected in the stakeholder engagement. So participation in the one-day events, basically again, Muttaburra lead the way because every child in that area, the minute you hold something, everyone is there. So I think that's something to work on this year is how can we provide more services because we know that they're going to use it if we provide it. And then Jericho in those older age groups. So we had 6 KPIs that we measured from the program. The first one was based on the water safety and life-saving skills. So our KPI that we set was 75% of the council region youth were meeting National Water Safety Framework benchmarks and 75% of the council youth participating in water safety messaging, either through in-person attendance, social media or print media campaigns. So that second KPI is very hard to measure because even though our Facebook posts, we can measure how much engagement is happening, that they've clicked on the link, have they actually engaged with the social media? We put the print media in our council gazette, have they actually read that? So that KPI is a bit airy-fairy, but we measured the in-person attendance. It was very easy for us to measure who actually attended. And so Alpha, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, in-person attendance were met. Jericho's 5 to 9 age group was met, and Muttaburra's 0 to 4, 5 to 9 were met. Over 75% attended either the one day in their location or the 2-day program in Barcaldine. Now, we know in Alpha, our 10 and overs aren't meeting benchmark or that KPI because 90% of 10 and overs are at boarding school. So there is a story behind all the figures why it's not happening. So in Aramac, they're below 9 years. Their uptake is decreased because this is the first season that they've actually had a formal Learn to Swim program and it's new for the parents, so we would expect that to increase next year. Muttaburra's older 10 and overs, I would assume the reason for that dramatic decrease again is it's only a P6 school in Muttaburra. They're all at boarding school, therefore they're not actually attending council programs. As a whole though, council region didn't meet the benchmark and it's because of the communities that had the lower percentages averaged out. So our social media and print media exposure. So the CPR post and the post regarding the program, on average, the posts were viewed by over 4,000 people. So we meet our criteria because ABS data says there's 2,500 and something in the Barcaldine region. And the BRC Gazette, we said 100% of the population because we're assuming every resident is getting that in their mailbox. Okay, so KPI number 2 was Learn to Swim, actually measuring their Learn to Swim or water safety skills. So our KPI was 70% of the council region youth needed to be at national benchmark. So by national benchmark, we're referring to the Australian Water Safety Council has for every age group what every age group should be able to do and when. So we measured by that standard. So what we need to note though is only 36.5% actually attended the program. So we're only benchmarking 36.5% of our population.
Would it be fair to say that the children, sorry to interrupt, that of that 36.5%, they would come from families who are more concerned, so therefore the skill level could be inherently higher?
What we're saying is those 36.5 are exactly that. So they're the kids who are engaged in water safety education programs already because they've attended the program because they're either involved with a group that says, hey, you should come, or the parent's seen the program and knows the child should come. The other 65% are the kids that are probably below benchmark even more. So the stats are skewed. We could have provided a whole overview of Alpha because we benchmark all the school kids at Alpha and Jericho. So we know roughly that most of the kids are meeting benchmark, a little bit lower than what's here. But I didn't add them in because then that's skewing the 5-town representation. We tried to keep everything. If the program provided the data, we showed it, so every town could be compared equally. So if we look at Alpha of the kids who attended the programs, 0 to 4%, 100% of the kids are either reaching benchmark or above benchmark. They're averaging 33.1 lessons per year. So the majority of the kids are attending 2 lessons a week at least, and any intensive programs like Barcaldine Regional Council provide the 5 programs, the 1-day programs provide another 4. The kids are averaging 33.1 lessons. Aramac, so we know that the 10 and overs are meeting benchmark because 80% were above benchmark, 16.7 lessons every child averages. Barcaldine averages 7.5 lessons, and their 10 and plus year olds are 85.7 above benchmark. Jericho, all age groups, again, 27.3 average lessons. And Muttaburra, they're 0 to 4s and 5 to 9s are above benchmark. And they're averaging 12.8 lessons. They're 10 plus, again, majority of the boarding school was not measuring, and their data was skewed because they've actually had a new family move to town in that plus 10 age group, and those 3 children didn't meet benchmark, and that was the whole percentage of that captured data there. So on a whole though, we are actually averaging in the Barkey Regional Council, every child in that program on percentage-wise, above 75% of all age groups are above benchmark down the bottom, and on average, children are attending 19.3 lessons per year. If we compare that to metro areas, usually children are in term, and they're swimming at least compared to our 19.3, but again, they have access to year-round swimming. Swimming pathways was section 3. So our KPI here was to increase swimming club membership by 20%. Why are we focusing on increasing swimming club membership by 20%? Well, swimming club should be driving water safety programs. Even though they're involved in competitive swimming, they should be focusing on those learn to swim pathways because ultimately that's where their kids are coming from. So in our under 8s, Alpha has the highest percentage of under 8s. Over 9s was Aramac, and total percentage population again was Aramac engaged in swimming club participation. So it'll be interesting to see next year where those figures sit, because our aim is to try over the years to increase that by 20%. CPR awareness was our KPI number 4. We wanted to deliver 75% of the council youth, and we wanted to deliver engagement with 75% of CPR training with council region programs. So we actually included any CPR awareness we knew the kids were receiving. So in our towns, both Alpha and Jericho schools provide CPR awareness through Royal Life Saving Queensland to 100% of their students. In Barcaldine, St Joey's took up that offer. We know in Muttaburra 100% of the school students were attending the program. In Aramac, the school did take up that offer. The program actually wasn't delivered though due to dates clashing, and they're scheduled for term 4 this year. So we know in Alpha the 0 to 4s and the 5 to 9s are meeting that 75% benchmark. In Jericho, the 5 to 9, the school-aged children are reaching that 75 delivery of CPR, and in Muttaburra it's the under ages. For me, looking at that, it's the adults that is the concern. So percentage-wise, for each of the 5 towns of adults actually engaging in free CPR awareness, the message is not getting across. Even though our KPIs relate to youth, if the parents aren't engaging in it, the chances that the parents are asking the kids to engage it decreases. So I think this year we really need to try and focus on bringing those parents along for the ride as well. Again, delivery of engagement with 75% CPR training within the council region population. We included our social media and print again. Are the parents actually engaging with the Facebook message? Off the back, I'm going to say probably no, because how many complaints did council actually receive that the first post we put in the Gazette was incorrect? And that was my fault. I didn't proofread. It had 30 compressions to 20 breaths. And I think we had like 2 people pointed out that, hey, your post is wrong. So if only 2 people said the post was wrong, are they actually reading what's in the Gazette?
Tell you what, not so you've got to go back.
Oh my God.
Colour to know and actually bringing them back to law.
Okay, engagement cultural KPI was delivery of sustainable individual programs. Program is delivering it, ultimately is not. That's what we want to see. Again, and the services are actually now all of those programs. So we want to see programs is our long-term to take up. Looking across our region, number of lessons actually number of below benchmark. I say that I know our season, so we see that rise. How we get the younger children, the under 4s. Comes back to swim teachers. If we don't have swim teachers in the towns, you can't expect lessons to be delivered. And if that centre is not registered, you're not going to offer professional development to those teachers, therefore their skills are going to become outdated very quickly. So what we need to do, 1, find some teachers, and 2, register centres. If we're after sustainability, that's where it lies. If we're not registered centres and we don't have some teachers, nothing is going to change. Because I can say, as an outreach provider to Aramac, even though we have plus 20 kids attending those lessons, on a profit margin, we lose $140 every week we go to Aramac. So on a business decision, that's a terrible business decision, but we know if we're doing that, we see the increase in swimming club membership, and when we do community programs, we know those children are going to come. Barriers and facilitators. So I'm part of the stakeholder engagement. Anyone who wanted to participate, there was a section to identify services, to identify the barriers and facilitators to programs. So every town had common barriers and facilitators, and other towns had very specific barriers and facilitators. So I'm going to talk mainly about the regional ones, not going to the individual town ones, because I think that's something more that the individual towns need to address rather than the whole group. Okay. So, you guys are facilitating because you're providing the dollars to run programs and you're creating the awareness within the community. Our national stakeholders are supporting programs, education, materials and donations.
You overlooked a very important one, but it's written there that I don't think you should. The provision of the facilities. That comes at a tremendous cost. The programs are cheaper than the fund.
Just wait for the next slide, because at the moment, your facilities, even though they are a facilitator, they're also a barrier. And through the stakeholder engagement, there were more barriers to the facilities than what there were benefits, if that makes sense. But I completely agree, our facilities, if you look at per capita, I don't think you'd find a LGA that would have per capita. I think on the Australian National Aquatic Alliance just released their report. I think it's something like 5,000 people per aquatic centre is the national average, and we're 5 centres per 2,500. You guys are well above average, doubling average.
Our budget tells us that too.
And your budget definitely tells you that, and I'm very well aware that federal/aquatic industry budgeting every year. And the reason they do that is because they assume that water safety is a school issue, and they think the schools are the ones delivering everything. And in the city, yeah, they are, because they have pools and they're delivering it. But out here, none of our schools have a pool, is number one. Number two is half our kids aren't actually attending a physical school, they're doing distance ed. And number three, our under fours really aren't associated with the school, so they don't go to a after school or daycare associated with an educational facility, they're all private. So those assumptions that the government's making aren't actually what's happening in rural areas. Our LTS providers are making things happen. Swimming clubs, even though they're not focused on water safety, they're driving the culture as well. And schools. So schools need that increased engagement from the school brings children to a program. Barriers and major challenges. So if we ask our parents group, they're going to say distance. Distance to programs, even though they've got a pool in every location, is still an issue. I can say from a personal stance that I know the average distance of an alpha learn to swim parent is 80 kilometres one way. The majority of our parents are travelling 80 kilometres one way, so that's 160 kilometres for one lesson, and the majority of them are doing that 2 times a week. The costs add up. Professional development. So every single learn to swim teacher who provides stakeholder engagement said they wanted more professional development. And we're working on it. We've got an agreement with Swim Australia, as long as we keep our registered numbers as they are, that they will deliver 1 swim info session in our area this season. So that is them flying out someone to deliver a mini conference, the same as they do for Townsville and Brisbane. So I think that's a great plus. Council. So even though council is providing funds, many of the stakeholder engagements also identify council as barriers in providing services as well. So access into facilities by learn to swim providers was highlighted, and the number of services actually provided at council facilities was highlighted by community members as well. A lot of that goes back to the professional development. If we don't have the professional development available for the locals, they're not going to have people who can run the services. And then starting age. So if children aren't enrolled in Learn to Swim under 5, they're already below benchmark before they start at state schools. So community goals for 2021 as a whole region from the stakeholder engagement, what we took out was we need to increase community stakeholder engagement. So as a whole, from council, we need further feedback. From local community groups, we need further feedback. Otherwise, the design of the program cannot be implemented to increase the areas that we're currently not reaching our KPIs. We need to address the benchmarking issue. So how can we see those areas with the children who aren't meeting benchmark? How do we catch them up? We need to address our KPI action items. So the ones that aren't reaching our KPI, they're the ones we need to focus on. Increase individual LTS programs in all of the towns. Increase our starting age for Learn to Swim. So we need to see more under 5 development. We need to increase our professional development, and we need to address the boarding school situation, because we're under the assumption that the children at boarding school are 1, getting their water safety training, 2, engaging in CPR. We need to find out from the boarding school parents, is that actually what's happening, because if they're not getting it, we need to see how can we incorporate that. So that means running the programs on the school holidays when those kids can attend. Currently, they're all run during the school term, and that was the choice of basically the parent feedback that we got. So I think that's just engaging with those parent groups to find out what's actually happening. So individual community goals. So looking from the feedback from each individual community, each community provides their goals that they think are important to them. So for Alpha, it was increasing first aid and CPR education to our secondary students. Again, it's our boarding school students that we want to focus on. Increase our awareness of high area who would really like to increase our senior citizens' access to hydrotherapy training and programs. We want to increase our access and awareness of our seniors programs. Currently, only 10% of our over 65s are in the water. We want to see that increased. Increase the access and awareness of water safety programs for our children 11 years and older. Again, our boarding school cohort. Purpose-built learn to swim facilities. So we want a wish list item. We've got kids who are enrolled in Learn to Swim, but Learn to Swim water requires 32 degrees temperature. Is addressing that item, but on a wish list item, that's what the community in Alpha is looking for. And that goes back to our hydrotherapy. Our physiotherapists can actually find the physiotherapy facility that they have. Increase access to programs for low socioeconomic and continue to work with council to support and enhance the drowning prevention program. Aramac, from our feedback, they are calling out for professional development. Every single stakeholder engagement said they need professional development, and that's what we're going to deliver. Ongoing support for club members and school teachers, grants for equipment, lessons, swim shirts for trainers, mentoring, workshops for stroke correction and learn to swim teachers, first aid training for 15 years and over to address the lone lifeguard issue at their pool. So their lifeguard and a very important issue that most of the time, like most pools, they operate on a lone lifeguard, one person qualified on the premises at all times. They said the majority of their patronage is under the age of 15 years. So if they have an accident, who's their second responder? Who's calling 000? Who's helping with first aid? Who's getting their oxygen bottle? They said the easiest way for them to address that issue was not to figure out a parent that they could call, is to train those kids 15 years and over in basic first aid so they have a second responder there ready to go if an accident ever happens. Training for adult swim programs, disability programs and aqua aerobic instructors. So we're going to tie that one in to the professional development opportunities that they've asked for. Community goals from Buck Alden from the stakeholder engagements returned. Programs run and operated that are transparent, including learn to swim, stroke correction, and other aquatic activities for the broader community like adult programs and disability programs. From the parents that provided feedback was the parents didn't actually know who was providing lessons and when the lessons were run. So it's making everything transparent to everyone. Professional development opportunities for learn to swim professional providers and swim teachers. So that goes back to same as Aramac, they need professional development. Increase access to CPR programs for both children and adults. Increase transparency of learn to swim and stroke correction services provided to the community. Increase the volume of learn to swim and stroke correction services to the community. The parents felt like the demand wasn't met, and registered learn to swim provider. Jericho, access to first aid and secondary school students, increased awareness. They're basically sitting the same as Alpha because the majority of our stakeholders between Alpha and Jericho are the same stakeholders. And the community goals from Muttaburra. So they want a development of a swim club modified to a small town participation. So we're currently working with them. What does that look like? How can they participate with Queensland Swimming? They want regular lessons available to them, the same as every town. Water fun days with fun, pool and outside activities. So from a community, that's what they're looking for.
What happened to the mud skippers? Are they
So
folded?
they're not folded, they're a community group. So they're just an association. They're no longer registered with Queensland. What it boils down to is Queensland Swimming's affiliation fee is $350. Plus then each member then has to pay their $90+ to register. Those kids really aren't looking for competing. They want a recreational group that they can involve and gather with. So currently, Queensland Swimming's model doesn't fit with a small town model. We've voiced that with Central Queensland Swimming, we've voiced that with Queensland Swimming, and it's trying to work through those issues. How do we make that happen? So for Jericho, it was becoming a satellite club of Alpha, and Aramac tried that last year. And how's it working, Paula?
Oh, I haven't really had that much feedback, Julian.
Yeah, so from our feedback, the parents are enjoying it, that's the model that they've opted for next year as well. But they basically run as their own club, but we all share the affiliation cost. And I think for small towns, it's the sponsorship issue. If every little club in town is trying to get sponsorship from the same businesses, it doesn't become viable. So we're trying to work with Marlborough, how does that work for them? I think they're going to reach Longreach because Longreach is their closest town, and same with outreach providers. Longreach is closer to get to them for a weekly offered lesson. Just a quick plug. So this basically feeds into our PhD at the moment with JCU, if any of the counsellors are interested. We're looking at injury as a whole in rural Queensland. So that's drowning, road accidents, farm-related injuries, basically everything, looking at why is rural Queensland at a higher risk and why our services are less than other governments. So if anyone wants to come along on the 3rd of September, council program actually features a large piece in the PhD confirmation. Any questions? I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Wakey.
Let there be light. Danielle, all on track for this year's event, although your ability to draw on swim instructors from interstate could be limited.
Yes, so we've already locked in. Chris Wright has jumped at the opportunity to come back. He loved the small town community spirit and said he's done, locked in, coming, and we've penciled in a date. We'll let council know, I think it's, from memory, like the 22nd, 23rd of February, 20-something-ish. So that later week in February is the date he's available to come out, and we'll just check with community groups to make sure that's viable. From our opinion, that February date works well too. The kids have already been in the water all season and they can actually get something out of the program compared to running it in September when we're kicking off. We've got kids who have been in the water for 3-4 months.
Plus it's cold.
Plus it's cold and they jump in and just go straight to the bottom of the pool and we lifeguard. So second teacher, I think Tim wants to come out again as well, and he's great with the kids. But again, it's just fitting in with his schedule and hopefully they both meet up.
Right. Any further questions? That degree of detail, and as you say, you've got to make some assumptions around population. It's the same assumptions we make, it's the same assumption government makes right through. We only get a snapshot. Obviously, that'll be updated after Tuesday last week with the new census. But then you get as you also said, you get the crossover with Aramac rural people maybe going to Marlborough or perhaps even some Buckwood rural people going Aramac way.
I can say that I know from our private Learn to Swim, we have 35 children that live in Barcaldine and postcode who are either attending Aramac or Jericho Learn to Swim services. So those numbers then become wonky because there's no services they can attend here. So it all evens itself out.
It fits into it's not something that local governments have always considered core business, as you say, education's probably been where it's normally lumped, but we do have a significant portion of students, or young people in our area that don't attend regular schooling. They go to School of the Air and they are exempt from the statewide mandated Learn to Swim.
Yeah.
And they offer a quasi 2 afternoon sessions at their weekly, once 1 week a term in sessions, but it's water-based play activity and supervised really, it's not dedicated.
Capricorn actually invited us to their distance ed program last year, so we actually benchmarked distance ed for them and provided some feedback to them where they were meeting, and I think it opened their eyes. So Queensland Education actually have a water safety and education plan that schools are meant to be providing. Part of that plan states that it's meant to be delivered by a registered Learn to Swim teacher. So the school teacher either has to be registered or a provider. So
Do you work with Central Highlands in this same space at all?
No, we don't. We work a little bit with the Emerald Aquatic Centre with the policy and checking that they're meeting requirements there, but we haven't actually worked with Central Highlands Council. So if we know the Learn to Swim teachers aren't local in the area, how are the schools actually providing the program that they're meant to be providing? And it goes on an honesty system, no one's checking the information that they're actually providing what they're providing.
Very good, thank you for that very detailed analysis. The second, like all of these things, it's the second one that tells a bit better. Like there's a broad baseline there that's obviously specific, but then broad, and as you say, it's also affected by what stakeholders bother to engage.
I think this year, I'm going to be the first one to say stakeholder engagement was very rushed last year, and COVID played a part in that. We didn't know, one, if the program was going to go ahead in September, and two, when we could actually do it. And it was actually a sit down with the CEO and the mayor of, okay, let's quickly look at a calendar. Yes, we're going ahead. Let's just pick this random date in February because we know no swimming carnivals are on. Who cares if any of the community groups can actually come? That's when we know we can get people out to run the program, and everything works backwards from there. So I think we are now in August. We know a program's going to happen. So I think by the end of this month, one, we need council stakeholder engagement created and returned. Two, dates out to our major stakeholders so we know that that date's going to work, and then start engaging the community groups. So we actually have everyone returned by the end of November.
All right, if there's no more, thank you very much.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Councillor Plum, you have a PCI in 338. Right, we need holiday dates for Jericho Bar Court, please, councillors. Motorhara wants the Melbourne Cup, Alpha wants the show. Does anyone want to disagree with those two for a start? Right, good. Jericho, what do we give them? What's the feedback?
They usually deal for sure.
No, that's the historical precedent, yes.
Mr Mayor, it should be 2022.
Jericho wanted, the year of West Tech, they wanted to be West Tech the holiday, but
Well, it's not going to be.
that's not.
We've got a, if you look, we've got a selfish internal reason for that, because there's a number of Jericho residents work out of the Alpha depot. So if they don't have their
Show on the
show on the same day, in a town that has no work, no supervisor, no,
That's right.
so there's a HR reason why day.
Mayor, May the 19th is Thursday. Or is it Wednesday the 18th?
It'll be Wednesday. Whatever day.
I think you've got 4 or 5 employees, Mr Mayor, from Jericho now that are working.
Yeah. So may I respectfully suggest that that becomes the same? And now I'm back to Barkle. Joe?
Jenny asked, Jenny put a question out, no response.
No, we asked for
Sorry, it didn't get distributed.
Tim's Mayor, no, because of there's so many to contact him, we thought something on the website or Facebook for people to respond to, but it didn't get up.
Okay. It's a show holiday. Let's put it on the show. Not that hard to suggest, is it? Possibly not even a real radical thought. Well, it's not a show holiday if you don't put it on the show. That's the other, like, it becomes the difference between a public holiday and a bank holiday.
It's a show got to be a Friday, Saturday, just a Saturday. Because it's a question we need to ask first.
Me?
Saturday. So my radical thought it coincide is not possible and it would probably be for two.
No negative on Melbourne Cup doing so, I'd say. In want of any other day, that's probably the one we've got to forfeit to, default to, Mr Mayor.
You're really going to get anyone to come to work on a Monday.
Just another thought, Mr Mayor, the golf hole in one next year, is that a possible date for a public holiday? $1 million hole in one.
Can anybody tell me, so yes to that, can I get some advice? Is there any way we can readily, quickly work out whether that week would be a pay week? If we're putting holidays on our own RDO weeks, we're just creating a HR nightmare. No one will be at work, you know.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Well, if it's, you know, you've got to think about it. If it's the Friday before and we have a public holiday, if there's an RDO the last Friday in October and we have Tuesday following as a gifted public holiday, absentee isn't a big enough problem as it is without creating one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's later in the year and we can probably plan our works around it, like if they do want to have that extended time off.
Right.
As long as we know about it, it's
So if
not
you
like
flag
a
it now, you
surprise.
can make it work.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, day.
Well, all I was thinking is it better, I don't have a problem with it being Melbourne Cup, but being midweek, we get that lag day in the middle. Are we better off picking a Friday or a Monday to make it a long weekend? Like Tuesday doesn't make it officially a long weekend, it makes it an artificial one where not only if council's got absenteeism, then so does the private sector. So I'm not being selfish thinking of council, it's everybody. But I am thinking of council as well.
The 1st of November 22 is Tuesday. That is a pay week.
That week is. That's the Friday before would not be an RDO. So what about the October long weekend? What about if we made the public holiday on the Friday prior to that? So the first Monday in October is a gazetted public holiday. It's the last week of the school holidays. School starts.
3rd of October.
Sorry?
3rd of October is a public holiday.
So then
The 30th of September.
September, which is the Friday prior to school commencing, a long weekend prior to the kids going back to school. And it's a Monday, Friday, not a Tuesday. Anyway, I don't care. Other than that, that's my thoughts on it. So I'm happy to be guided either way.
Mr Mayor, I don't mind because I'd love a long weekend. We don't get RDOs.
It definitely helps our
I'm going to
works.
get paid either way, so I don't care.
It definitely helps our works programming having it Friday or Monday, because you have a Tuesday, you have half the employees take Monday off, and you've got no crews.
Muttaburra have specifically requested the Melbourne Cup and have done for as long as I can remember, is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. No,
So-
that's a given, that one.
Yeah, so it stays as Melbourne Cup.
It was the 1st of November, not the 3rd.
Oh,
You
sorry,
said,
it's
wasn't it?
fixing the date.
Yeah.
If Barkwell and Aramac don't have a preference, which is what I'm hearing, then I think make it that.
Great.
It makes sense to make it.
30th.
Thoughts, Councillor Rowe?
No, I was just thinking there was no intention showed, or did we maybe not ask when we done our rounds the other week with the worksites visits?
Jericho, I think last time, Mr Mayor, was the survey that went out. They wanted, it was either going to be West Tech or the Melbourne Cup. They were fairly close in the results.
Mr Mayor, getting back to Councillor Hanson's question, is the hole-in-one golf, is that would that be a Friday? It's not all just happening on one day,
No, it's a weekend.
3-day event.
3-day event.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I believe it's a 3-day event.
They played 2 9 holes on the Saturday. They'll play 9 holes on the Saturday, and then they'll play 9 holes on the Sunday.
Day for the month?
July.
Yep.
First week in July. I can't tell you the exact, well, it'll be obviously the first Saturday and Sunday in July.
Second and third.
Yeah, because it's not actually technically need the money until next year's budget.
You know, what happens, excuse me, Mr Mayor, you can always have a side view.
Private conversation whilst we're all waiting, by all means, Councillor Peoples.
What happens there, they just have something, there's not much we're going to cancel if we don't go on Melbourne Cup Day in Aramac now, is there?
No, well, I'm just thinking, Muttaburra chooses Melbourne Cup because they all go to the function at the pub. And in the past couple of years, Aramac's also gone to the function at the Muttaburra pub.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're supporting Muttaburra, our community supports Muttaburra for the Melbourne Cup. So that might take it away a little bit.
Okay. So an alternative to that last Friday in September would be Aramac to go Melbourne Cup and give Barcaldine the Friday before the Golf Masters. They're going to hang around for it.
Well, I don't know, it's just, I know there's going to be a lot of people in town for it, some 150 nominations. Whether it's more or less a town benefit, probably more so than a personal benefit, I suppose. But that was just another date I had floating in my head.
So what I'm thinking is if we've got businesses
I was just about to
that
say,
have got a
Mr.
big
Mayor,
heap of an influx
do we
of
want to have a public
visitors,
holiday when we're
Wages.
yeah, I'm thinking we stay away from that event. We do, otherwise, you know, the motels and pubs surcharge on there.
Could create on an extra expense for them.
Including us, because we're going to possibly be asked to help set up, so our wages will go to triple time from the minute we start them on the job, so.
Is that right?
Whatever it is,
And it's-
overtime.
This Friday would be the 1st of July, which is end of year rollover. Be a nightmare for a public holiday.
Well, I'll move, it's the Friday the 30th September, I'll party, there you go.
So the Alpha Show for Alpha Jericho, Friday 30 September for Bark Walden, which gives them the long weekend to
Now, didn't
watch.
we, excuse me, sorry, Councillor Hanson, but didn't we just argue about that? If you put it on the 30th of September, is that the golf weekend, or that's the long
July.
weekend? That's the long
That
weekend.
makes it a 4-day weekend instead of what is currently a 3-day weekend. The NRL Grand Final's on Sunday night.
Queen's birthday.
Queen's Birthday, the old Queen's Birthday holiday is now the first Monday in October. So they make that a 4-day weekend, and then Aramac and Muttaburra get the Melbourne Cup. That's Councillor Hanson's motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gleeson. Thoughts and comments, debate before we go to the vote? It's finalistic. Once we do this, it goes to the Minister and it is what it is. And we've already got the time extension to do it. We have to do it today. Due tomorrow. Consultation could be limited to lunch.
So you're going to leave it on the table after lunch, are you?
Not unless I'm asked to. No, I have a mover and a seconder and I intend to put it to the vote unless there's a procedural motion to leave it late.
It's
Which I'm not hearing.
Can I leave this on the table till after lunch, please? Do I
You
need to
can't,
move the
but
motion?
you could ask Councillor Hanson, does he mind if we leave this motion sit on the table?
Councillor Hanson, would you mind if
What
we...
about Mr Mayor? We can come back to that later on an issue.
Mover and seconders indulgence, we'll leave agenda item 338 until a later stage of the meeting and move to 339 if somebody could please invite Councillor Plum
Thanks, Councillor
back
Hanson.
into the room. Whichever one of you has the biggest social media presence, quickly put a poll out with those 4 or 5 options and see what happens in the next 45 minutes.
Neither of us.
Hey,
I think probably, respectfully, it's probably me and I have no intention whatsoever of doing that, so. 339, annual Christmas close downs. This has been negotiated with the supervisors and staff in respective depots. Unless somebody has a philosophical problem here, this has already been communicated to staff, so we're affirming these shutdown periods. Moved Councillor Peoples, seconded Councillor Plum. Debate, there being none, all in favour? Carried. 3, 1, 0. I think you had a PCOI and we said you could stay. Sorry, a DCOI and we let you stay, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a completed operational plan.
Mr Mayor, this is the final report on the 2021 operational plan.
We just go through, highlight the obvious ones that have red boxes in quarter 4, and we'll cover off on explanations, and then if you wish to come back to anything as we go. So the first one I found is the Economic Development Board establishment, which without formal resolution, Council, we've elected to, and by defunding that in this year's budget, we've effectively said that wasn't to proceed. So we're comfortable with that. No further explanation required. On the next page is 322, the provision of airport security screening. Now, after we set the operational plan and the budget to do this, the need to do so was removed with the return to flight after the initial COVID shutdown. So it's remained red in quarter 4 because it hasn't been required. Comfortable with that?
Yep.
Then waste management environmental obligations, compliance with DES licence conditions has been identified as a red in quarter 4. Quick summary as to why that would be the case, please.
That is our waste landfill not complying with DES requirements.
Is that predominantly
As
on
a fires.
burning?
And it won't be sold until the new facility is open.
That's not going to solve the problem of burning in other facilities. Just have to ramp up our communication efforts against burning the landfill. They just burn. Obviously here, no matter what we communicate, we've got to lock it, shut it. We'll still, unfortunately, probably still have problems, but we can at least regulate the burning of the landfill because they won't get in there. We've just got to stop it in the other sense. It must stop, or the community will lose access. It's that simple. We can't run the risk. I will do, you can make a note please, there'll be a central piece in the next Gazette from me. You know, I personally took rubbish to the Alpha landfill following a major community event just recently, and I must have missed the arsonist by seconds. Like, it must stop, or we go to regulated screening. We're exempt from needing to have to meet the state's requirements on the population basis for regulated waste levy, but we won't continue to do that. If we're failing the DES requirements, they're going to say, well, you've got to move to that, or you will cop a fine. Like, we've got to improve our own personal messaging to people. It's not like we make our own commentary about it, but that commentary needs to be very solid, individual, and collectively, it cannot be tolerated. To the point, if we have to install security cameras, and if we have to press charges, which would be, I imagine, without being a lawyer, arson, which are quite serious criminal offences, we have to do that. This community doesn't have the money to pay or being threatened with millions of dollars in fines on the basis of the inept approach by members within our community to complying with the law. Just can't continue. We're really working overtime as a council in so many areas of DES compliance. In fact, cost to the tunes of millions of dollars, for example, with sewerage compliance, which arguably people have been swimming in Lagoon Creek for decades and haven't had a problem, but we're going to comply. We're going to spend millions of dollars doing so. If we have to fence the landfills off, if we have to put cameras there, if we have to bring the police in and press charges, that's what we have to do. Must stop.
Unfortunately, Mr Mayor, and I will say it's a small number of people in our communities, getting closer to punitive measures like that, I think, are going to be the only real deterrent. I think a lot of people have got the message, but they're not too bad with their green waste and all that sort of stuff and doing the right thing by the larger community, but there are persistent number of members of the community that just don't care. They will light it up given any chance.
I think there must be people that just drive there to do it.
There's a bit of sightseeing goes on at the Vaki. I do know that. I've been out dropping stuff off lately, and there just seems to be vehicles drive in, do a lap, drive back out again.
We're not at that section of the meeting, but perhaps later in the meeting we may ask for officers to come back with an options document to a future meeting for controlled security at our other 4 facilities, because realistically I think a council staff and council deserves to be quite, I was going to say proud, but quite satisfied with having had 3 or 4 areas reach red, and a very clear explanation for why all of them did. We've achieved, by and large, our operational plan. Now there's orange or yellows that you may wish to comment on, but to not have reds in Q4 means there's been some semblance of projects completed, and the one area that's red that we're upset about is arson. Well, they make jars for it. Pretty simple. Now, to the floor for comments on any of the yellows or even greens, if you wish.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and I've probably been told before, I've probably asked the question before, what's the qualification between green, orange and red? Like if we have 100%, what is the like the demarcation line between an orange and a red or a green?
Well, it's more definitive than that. So green means we've achieved. The yellow, orange is still in progress. So we haven't achieved 100%, but at least we've made an effort. Red means outright we didn't comply or we didn't achieve. So red is a fairly strong colour. If we made an attempt and we didn't get the 100%, then it's yellow or the eye colour. So there's no percentage, more a...
Hasn't started, has started, is finished.
So yeah, the yellow is anything between red and green. So green is we've achieved. Red is we didn't achieve. Anything in the middle is yellow.
That would have to be the most obvious statement I've heard all day. We have a three-colour coding system and orange is anything between red and green.
It's written to a traffic light system, red, orange, green, it's caution. Proceed with caution.
Would you like different shades of orange?
No, it's just like, to mine,
Orange is caution.
well, but it's less than 50%, sort of like we're not quite a pass. It's and I know that's just an arbitrary figure, like whereas red is, well, it's obviously a failure, but it's a non-compliance. No, that's all right.
So if we look at
But if you get
an example of in the town streets under quality infrastructure, Aramac Pool car park seal Q1 was red. So I'm obviously, my interpretation, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brett, that would mean that hadn't happened in the first quarter. Work planning for it commenced in the second quarter. Works were underway in the third quarter, and by the fourth quarter, the project is complete.
But if I can find it, if we take the sealing of the airstrip, which we did very little to last year.
Yep. So it's there in the same page. Barcaldine Airport reseal of runway 1432 was red for the first 3 quarters, as in nothing happened. And then in the fourth quarter, which was while we're doing budget development, they did actually go and do a costing and did prep works ready for that seal to occur, which was after the May Day Festival, when they were like, it really does need to, or can't be delayed out of any future budget. So there must have been an element done.
Yeah.
There was prep works done, so that's why it's orange, but it hasn't been, the actual seal hasn't been complete.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in health and wellbeing 5.3.2, it's all orange, but it's to ensure public spaces have appropriate disability access. Is there, like, what is the progress? Like, is there progress on that all the time? Like, is there a...
To give you examples, this year would be the disability access to the Aramac Administrative Office and the Barcaldine Regional Office, and the Oak Street footpath redevelopment projects.
So it does include like the street.
Yeah,
streets.
public space.
That is public streets, and we did, Mr. Mayor, we did identify key areas that needed work done. So we had. That's more of a reactive program. You identify where there's a problem and then fix it.
Because
It is ongoing. It will be ongoing.
It's something that was brought up to like Councillor Arthur and myself at the 60.
There are still places that need a solution.
So That's going to stay yellow because to mark it green would mean that we've identified 100%. And that's probably not likely in the foreseeable future.
Through you, Mr Mayor, even the very first one, 1.1.1, operate in accordance with the adopted budget. We've stayed within budget, but there's 12 to 15 projects that were in last year's budget that we've carried forward. I know we haven't gone over budget, but we haven't delivered the budget really either. We've prepared one. And I know there's reasons for why those projects aren't happening, but
I take that as being that you operate within the financial limits of the budget. Not about achieving the budget outcome.
But, okay, so for example, if we have a $10 million budget, we spend $9.8 million but only deliver 50% of the works. That's not really operating within accordance of our budget. Look, monetary wise, if we've spent more of our budget than we've done the work, then we're not technically over budget in a holistic approach, but we're not, to my mind, really.
Well, the wording there, we probably need to change into achieve budget targets rather than that operate in accordance with the adopted budget.
Because to mine, Mr Mayor, the adopted budget is we're doing this project, this project, this project, and I know we look at it in total, but we also have specific amounts attributed to each of those line items. And there will be gains and pluses and minuses on some of them. And I know we have, well, especially the last year, we've had probably more constraints than we have and more work to do than we have in recent history.
That's, I suppose when you set the operational plan, which council does adopt at the start of the year, we need to be clear what those outcomes are and what they mean. My interpretation is different to yours. So.
And in my defence, Mr Mayor, it's a learning process for me as a new councillor too, trying to get things to make connections of where they affect each other.
As your point, Councillor Harts, is a very good one. You can stay within the confines of your budget, but if you don't do all the works that you set down to do in your budget, it's not really accurate in what budget was set for at the beginning of that financial year.
And there'll be external investment. COVID's one, changes in state government direction, extra pressures from.
I understand what you mean, but yeah, it's just my interpretation of those words is different to yours.
So perhaps what we need to do is have a look at, irrelevant to this one, it's an information report, we probably just need to pull the terminology that we've used in the new op plan in light of this conversation and see that there's not any ambiguity about the way it can be interpreted, so that we can simplify the wording to something that is not interpretable, is clear in its definition one way or the other, and then we can, if necessary, we can amend that to make it clear.
Mr Mayor, this report comes to council quarterly, so at the first quarter review, that's when we can pick up those definitions.
And a suggestion that items that we no longer require, because it just looks bad against the economic development where we've gone red, and we know that it's not a bad mark against council. We've just decided not to pursue that maybe there's an avenue there to put something, either just blanket out or put no longer required, because it does draw the eye to failure or to perceived failure. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to ask that we adjourn the meeting 3 minutes early for lunch because I have to follow up on something before Tuesday afternoon, just go to lunch. So can we do that, please? Thank you.